My boss laughed when I raised my hand and said, "I'll take the worthless project." I could hear the snort around the room, the scrape of a chair, the tiny chorus of people trying not to smile. This is embarrassing to admit, but I took it anyway. If you're new here, listen closely, because the thing I picked up off that conference table looked like trash, and everyone treated me like I'd just volunteered to take out the trash. If stories like this keep you watching, tap that like and stay, because I'm going to tell you exactly how I ended up here and why I didn't walk away. My name's Ava. First year at Harrow and Wild, a mid-sized firm with a taste for buzzwords, and a worship service every Monday called All Hands. That morning, the CEO slid a manila folder to the edge of the table like he wanted gravity to do the rest. "Legacy pilot," he said. The client never launched. No budget, no sponsor, no KPIs. "Do we close it, or—" He let the sentence trail off. Nobody reached. Why would they? The file already had coffee stains in the shape of failure. I took it. I can't even tell you why. Maybe because I was tired of being the note-taker whose ideas got rephrased by someone with a deeper voice. Maybe because my mother used to say, "If everyone steps around a mess, the person who cleans it up owns the room." Or maybe because this was the only thing in the building no one else would fight me for. I said, "I'll handle it," and that was when my manager, Cullen, let out that short, sharp laugh that sounds like a stapler misfiring. "Knock yourself out, rookie," he said. "Just don't bill more than 3 hours. It's dead." He rapped the table with his pen, moved on to real projects, and the room resumed its rhythm, metrics, milestones, all the words we used to prove we're useful. I slid the folder into my bag and felt, for the first time that month, like I owned something. People think humiliation explodes. It doesn't. It sifts in. It's the way two coworkers fall silent when you pass their pods. It's the chuckle someone tries to swallow but can't. It's the Slack message from Cullen. "Remember to log your time ethically." As if choosing the orphaned project made me suspect by default. The legacy pilot had a name so generic I could barely focus on it. Nimbus Care, Healthcare Analytics. 3 logos on the title page. The kickoff date was 2 years old. Inside the folder, a dead SharePoint link. A list of stakeholders whose titles had changed twice since the kickoff. And a faded sticky note that said, "Ask MD about the incentive framework. No one will approve." Everyone had initialed it as if that was a ritual that made it less of a corpse. I started with what was still alive, the contract. Legal had scanned it lopsided. I'd printed it, taped the margins to square the pages, and read. There's a rhythm to bad contracts. The fluff sits up front. The teeth hide in the appendices. Appendix D was labeled Ancillary Performance Considerations, which is corporate for things we don't want to say out loud. I didn't understand it yet, but I circled it in pencil and wrote one word. Why? Cullen stopped at my desk around 4, leaned on the partition like a man inspecting damage after a storm. "You're still on that?" he said, voice syrupy with concern, just getting my arms around it. "It's not a growth opportunity, Ava." He lowered his voice. "You don't want to anchor your brand to lost causes. Visibility is earned on velocity." What I wanted to say, I've been sprinting in circles behind other people's slides for 6 months. What I actually said, understood. When he walked away, I reopened Appendix D and followed the cross-reference to a file path that didn't exist anymore. It pointed to an internal drive name I didn't recognize. Silo Shpap Compliance. So Legacy Nimbus Care. Our IT had migrated everything twice since that label, which meant the only person who might know where it went was the kind of person no one asks until the servers catch fire. I brought the folder to Marcus in infrastructure. He is the reason the building breathes. He also hates when people show up without a ticket. I brought coffee. He took the coffee, tapped the cup lid with a fingernail, and said, "What do you want?" "An archaeological dig," I said, placing the contract on his desk. "Silo 05 became what?" He smirked. "Flirt better with the routing demon." "I brought you single origin." He sighed like a man who secretly loves being the hero. Silo 05 was remapped to Atlas during the ransomware scare. 2 migrations after that, Atlas became Archive North. If the file survived, it's under a hash nobody remembers. He typed like the keyboard owed him rent. You're in luck. Someone forgot to purge an index. I stood quietly while he searched. He narrowed the results. You'll need access, which you won't get. Can you escort me? I asked. He glanced over his monitor like a suspicious cat. I didn't see you. You didn't see me. He granted read-only, time-box to 30 minutes to a ghost account. Bring the cup back, he said. I promised. The Archive North directory looked like a basement after a flood. Misnamed folders, half-rotted spreadsheets, versions labeled, finaled, like prayers. I opened a PDF that refused to render, a CSV that crashed Excel, and then found a folder called Incentive. Inside, 5 files, each with a date, each newer than the last meeting note on the project. I clicked the newest. It prompted for a password. Of course it did. I tried the project code, the client acronym, the legal entity string. Nothing. 10 minutes left. I opened the oldest file instead. No password. A grid of thresholds and payouts. It looked like a model for a rebate program tied to clinical adoption metrics. Hard enough to measure that no one wants to. Soft enough to hide in an appendix. Every line had a note. Deferred until validation. Hold pending data audit. Escalate to CFO. The last note said, settle per sec. 14, boo, IUE. I flipped to the contract and found sec. 14. It was about contingent considerations. 14 pages of gray language that read like it had been written by a sad poet in a windowless room. But there it was, a clause that allowed for a performance payout if certain outcomes were met, outcomes no one had tracked because the project was dead. I took a breath. This was nothing yet. Numbers without context are just hopes that learn to count. I copied the file names, closed the window, and sprinted the cup back to Marcus. He looked at me over the monitor. You got what you need? Maybe, I said. What's sec? 14B. Do you? To me? He shrugged. To finance, it's the reason they sleep with the lights on. At my desk, someone had taped a post-it to my monitor. Don't drown in Nimbus. The handwriting was neat. I didn't recognize it. I peeled it off, stuck it inside the folder, and opened our CRM. If any outcomes had been met, adoption rates, data accuracy, any of the fuzzy math we sell as impact, the client would have bragged somewhere. They all do. Executives treat metrics like new cars. If they have them, they announce them. The client's name was Averline Health. I found a quarterly newsletter buried on their site. Scanned it. A paragraph about improved care coordination trends using analytics dashboards. No vendor named. A chart with a baby blue line drifting up over 12 months. I printed it and laid it beside the incentive grid. If the line matched the thresholds, someone, somewhere had left money on the table, or buried it, or both. Cullen pinged me. Need you in war room for Nova pitch. Deck polish, not content. Translation, rearrange someone else's bullets so they look expensive. I took the folder with me. In the war room, the senior associate, Tara, was pacing with a laser pointer like a coach rehearsing a play. You can tighten the benefits slide, she said, handing me a tablet. Keep it punchy. Cullen wants less nuance, more heat. Less nuance, more heat. That should have been stenciled on the lobby wall. I tuned out the jargon and stared at the folder until the room cleared. I took a photo of the newsletter chart with my phone, then walked to legal. May from contracts sits behind a plant she calls liability. I stood in the plant's shadow and said, if a contingent consideration clause exists, but nobody tracked outcomes, whose job is it to ask? May pushed her glasses up like she was lifting a curtain. If it's ours, it's yours. If it's theirs, it's theirs. If it's in the gray, it's everyone's until someone gets tired. And if no one asks, then the gray wins. She paused. Why? Appendix D, I said. Her eyes sharpened. Who gave you Appendix D? It was in the file. She smiled without showing teeth. Then you didn't get it from me. At 7:40 p.m., the office had that post-storm quiet that makes you hear the carpet. I opened a blank notebook and wrote, "What is Nimbus Care? Who killed it? Who benefits if it stays dead?" Then I wrote a list of names from the original stakeholder page. The sponsor, gone, promoted to a role so lofty he breathes thinner air. The project manager, moved to another firm. The finance liaison, still here, a man named Don who wears shirts the color of meetings. The clinical advisor, an external doctor whose email bounced. I emailed Don, "Quick question, Rye, Averline, Nimbus, need a sanity check on Appendix D." He replied 2 minutes later, "Never heard of Nimbus. You probably mean Nova." That was impossible. His initials were on the sign-off sheet. I screenshotted the sheet, sent it back, and phrased it politely. "You initialed this 2 years ago. Any recollection?" He didn't answer that night. On my way out, I passed Cullen at the elevator. He saw the folder under my arm and grinned like he'd spotted a mascot. "You still married to your pet rock?" "Until it purrs," I said. "Projects don't purr," he said. "They bleed time." At home, I threw my bag on the couch and stared at the ceiling. My apartment smells like lemon cleaner and ambition. I boiled water, made tea, opened my laptop. I shouldn't have. I should have slept. I typed anyway. Averline Health, Care Coordination Metrics, Vendor Neutral. A press release from a regional conference surfaced. A panel snippet where an Averline VP talked about a pilot-turned-quiet rollout of analytics that finally did something. No vendor named. One sentence I reread 5 times. We structured our internal incentives to accelerate adoption without waiting for external rebates. We're on schedule to close the loop this quarter. Close the loop. The kind of phrase people use when money is supposed to move. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The transcript popped up. "Hi, Ava. This is Laurel from Averline. Got your note? Happy to clarify what we can share publicly." I hadn't sent a note. I checked the email I'd drafted to the general inbox at Averline. Unsent, still blinking in my drafts folder. I stared at the voicemail again. Someone had referred me, or someone had forwarded something of mine, or, more likely, the universe was finally bored of watching me play small. I saved the number. I didn't call back. Not yet. I wanted to walk into the next morning with something real. I opened my notebook and wrote one more line under the 3 questions. If Appendix D is a door, who locked it, and why does the key have dust? I fell asleep with the lamp on and the folder open at my feet, like a stray I was hoping would decide to stay. When I came in the next morning, the folder was already waiting on my desk. Not where I'd left it, half open in my bag, but laid out flat, squared to the edges of the keyboard, like someone had arranged it for display. No one admitted to touching it. The office was already humming, Tara juggling client calls, Cullen circling like a hawk, interns whispering about which conference room had snacks. But the way that folder sat there made my neck prickle. I slid it into my drawer, locked it, and opened Outlook. 5 new invites, none of them for Nimbus Care. I was supposed to spend my day polishing decks for projects that screamed growth and scalability. Instead, I kept thinking about that voicemail. Laurel from Averline. She sounded calm, like she wasn't surprised I'd asked, except I hadn't asked. At 11:15, when Cullen was in the war room yelling about font sizes, I called her back. "Hi, Laurel, this is Ava from Harrow and Wild." My voice cracked on my own name. "Oh, good," she said, cheerful, brisk. "Glad you reached out. Nimbus Care, right?" That word. Nimbus Care. She said it like it still existed, like it hadn't been buried under 2 years of dust. "Yes," I said, steady now. "I'm reviewing some legacy documents. Wanted to clarify what's safe to reference publicly." "Publicly?" She gave a soft laugh. "We've already published metrics in our quarterly. Surprised your firm isn't touting them. Adoption exceeded projections, most sites at a 140% of baseline. It was enough to trigger the incentive clause. Though I suppose that's your finance team's headache. My hand froze over the keyboard. Trigger the clause. She said it like an afterthought, like everyone already knew. Right, I murmured. Finance. Always the bottleneck. Well, she continued, Mo, we've closed our internal books. If Harrow and Wild wants to reconcile incentives, best do it before Q2 audit. After that, it rolls off. Reconcile incentives. The way she said it, like checking a box. I thanked her, ended the call, and stared at the wall until the hum of the office blurred. If her numbers were right, Appendix D wasn't theoretical, it was live. And live meant money. I opened the incentive grid again. Threshold 120% adoption. 140% adoption, 250K. Paid to project lead entity, defined in SECI. 14B, I, as the designated sponsor within Harrow and Wild, responsible for operational execution. Which meant if I could prove Nimbus Care wasn't abandoned, if I was the one who held the file, if I completed the reconciliation, then the bonus would route through me. It sounded impossible. Too good. Like a rumor whispered in a hallway. But the math was there. The clause was real. The client had confirmed. And yet, Don from finance showed up at my desk around 1:00. Blue shirt, coffee stain near the cuff, eyes that refused to meet mine. Got your email, he said flatly. About Nimbus Care? Don't chase it, he said. That's dead revenue. Finance closed the books 2 years ago. There's no payout. Client says adoption hit 140%. He blinked. Just once. Slow. Then leaned in. Drop it, Ava. I'm serious. You want a future here? Don't dig up ghosts. He walked away without waiting for my answer. I sat frozen, his words echoing. Drop it. Don't dig. Future here. It sounded less like advice, more like a warning. That night, I couldn't let it go. I took the folder home again, spread papers across my kitchen table until the laminate disappeared, cross-checked the incentive grid with Averline's public metrics. Even rough math said payout wasn't just possible, it was overdue. And if Don knew, if Cullen laughed, if the whole floor dismissed Nimbus Care as trash, then why hadn't anyone claimed it? By 2 a.m., I realized the truth. They hadn't missed it. They'd buried it. And if I wanted the $250,000, I'd have to dig it up alone. At 3 a.m., I wrote 3 words on a Post-it and stuck it to my laptop. Follow the money. The next morning, I walked into the office with dark circles under my eyes and a Post-it still stuck to my laptop lid. Follow the money. No one commented. No one had to. The exhaustion on my face said enough. By noon, the jokes started. Careful, one analyst smirked as I passed the break room. Ava's building her career on ghost projects. Another chimed in, hey, if Nimbus pays out, maybe she'll buy us all coffee. They laughed, but I heard the undercurrent, mockery dressed as humor. Cullen didn't stop them. He didn't even look up from his laptop when he added, she's free to waste her time. Some of us have real deliverables. That one stung. I smiled anyway, because what else do you do when your boss calls you useless in front of 20 people? I wanted to scream. Instead, I went back to my desk and opened the incentive files again. Numbers don't laugh. They just wait for you to notice them. Still, the pressure followed me home. My sister called that night, her voice full of that careful sympathy only family can deliver. Ava, Mom says you've been working late again. What's going on? Just a project, I muttered. Another one of those corporate hamster wheel things? No, this one's different, she sighed. You've been at that firm less than a year. You can't afford to make enemies. Drop it before it costs you. There it was again. Drop it. Don't dig. Everyone seemed to think I was poking a bear. I wanted to tell her about the $250,000, about how close I was to proving the clause had been triggered, about how maybe, for once, the girl who always got laughed at might come out ahead. Instead, I said, yeah, maybe you're right, and hung up before my voice cracked. The following week blurred into a loop of humiliations. Monday, Cullen assigned me support work on a new client pitch. Color schemes. not content. He called it entry-level appropriate. Tuesday, Don sent me a Slack with 3 words. Stop chasing Nimbus. No punctuation, no courtesy. Just a command. Wednesday, Tara caught me printing Averline's newsletters. Still digging your grave? She asked, smirking. Thursday, I overheard 2 interns betting how long before Cullen reassigned me to reception. By Friday, I broke. In the stairwell with the smell of dust and concrete in my lungs, I cried for the first time in months. Not because I was weak, but because humiliation corrodes you 1 layer at a time until you can't hold the mask anymore. But when the tears dried, something colder settled in. Not despair, not fear. Anger. I pulled the folder from my bag and spread it across the stairwell floor. The incentive grid, the contract clause, the client's adoption chart. Piece by piece, the story sharpened. They weren't ignoring Nimbus care, they were hiding it. Because if $250,000 was sitting unclaimed in Appendix D, whoever surfaced it would own it. And if that someone was me, the rookie they mocked, the girl Cullen laughed at in front of everyone, it would expose just how blind they'd been. That night, instead of going home, I stayed until the cleaners flicked on the lights. I combed through archived invoices, old adoption reports, scraps of emails that hadn't been wiped. Every thread pointed to the same truth. The threshold had been crossed. The bonus was real. At 2:37 a.m., I closed the last file and whispered into the empty office. They buried it. I'm going to dig it up. For the first time, I believed it. The office was nearly empty when I made the decision. The hum of the vents, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, the cleaner's cart squeaking down the hall, it all felt like cover. If anyone was going to find proof, it had to be me. And it had to be now. I pulled up the Archive North index Marcus had shown me weeks earlier. The screen glowed with hundreds of cryptic file names. One folder, incentive hidden, was password protected. I tried the usual suspects again. Project codes, acronyms, contract numbers. Nothing. My pulse quickened. If the payout lived here, I was staring at the lock. I closed my eyes and replayed Laurel's voicemail in my head. We structured our internal incentives to accelerate adoption without waiting for external rebates. We're on schedule to close the loop this quarter. Close the loop. It wasn't just jargon. It was a hint. I typed, Kloop, but 20, enter. Access granted. My breath caught. 5 subfolders appeared, each one stamped with dates that trailed the project's supposed death. Inside the newest file, a reconciliation spreadsheet, a neat table showing site adoption rates, 112%, 121%, 136%, 141%. Each cell highlighted in green, each line ending with the same note. Trigger clause, SEC, 14B, amount payable, $250,000. I sat back, numb. It was real. Not theory. Not rumor. Real. I wanted to scream, but instead I copied everything. Spreadsheets, PDF confirmations, even the audit trail that showed Don himself had accessed the file last quarter. He knew. Finance knew. They'd buried it. At 1 a.m., I printed the spreadsheet, stuffed it into the folder, and walked out into the freezing night. My breath came out in clouds, but inside, I was burning. The next day, Cullen cornered me at my desk. Ava, I need those Nova slides polished before the board review. I met his eyes for the first time in weeks. They'll get done, but I need 30 minutes with you. Private, he frowned. About what? Nimbus care. He laughed short and sharp, the same way he had when I volunteered. Still dragging that corpse? Not a corpse, I said quietly. A payout. For the first time, he didn't laugh. His smirk faltered, just a flicker, but enough to confirm what I already knew. He wasn't ignorant. He was complicit. I'll schedule us time, I added and walked away before he could answer. That night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by papers, charts, sticky notes with arrows pointing in every direction. The numbers told one story. Averline hit 140% adoption. The clause triggered, $250,000 was owed, but I knew what would happen if I brought this forward too early. They'd minimize me. They'd say I misread it. They'd sweep it into a committee, slap Cullen's name on the report, and I'd disappear. So I spent 3 nights building a case no one could erase. I mapped the contract, annotated every cross-reference, attached screenshots of the client's public metrics, and highlighted Don's audit log. I even wrote an executive summary in plain English. Per sec, 14B, Harrow and Wild is entitled to a $250,000 performance payout from Everline Health, effective immediately. Attached, proof of threshold achievement, client confirmation, financial reconciliation. At 4:12 a.m., I exported it as a single PDF, watermarked with my name. I emailed it to myself, to my personal drive, to a secure archive Marcus had slipped me. Redundancy on redundancy. Then I closed my laptop, leaned back in the chair, and whispered to the empty room, "You wanted me to drop it. I just raised it from the dead." The next morning, I booked time on the CEO's calendar. Not Cullen, not Don. Straight to the top. And for the first time since this started, I felt ready for war. The boardroom smelled like money and arrogance. Mahogany table polished to a mirror shine. Floor-to-ceiling windows spilling winter light onto a city that didn't care whether I sank or swam. Cullen sat at the far end, arms crossed, smirk loaded. Don from finance perched beside him, stiff as stone. 2 VPs shuffled papers they hadn't read, and at the head, Harrow and Wild CEO, Ms. Reynolds, a woman who could silence a room with a single tap of her fountain pen. She tapped it now. "Ava, you asked for this meeting. You have 30 minutes. Convince me it isn't a waste." My hands trembled under the table, but my voice didn't. "Nimbus care," Cullen chuckled low and cruel. "Still chasing ghosts." I opened my laptop, mirrored the screen onto the wall display, and let the first slide burn the words across 10 feet of glass. $250,000 unclaimed bonus. Contractual obligation sec. 14B. I. The room went still. I clicked again. Charts bloomed on the screen. Everline's adoption metrics climbing month after month. Past 120%, past 130%, cresting at 141%. Each threshold matched to payout clauses, highlighted in green. Don shifted in his seat. Cullen's smirk faltered. "This," I said, steady now, "isn't a ghost. It's money. Money tied directly to performance we delivered. Money finance knew about." I dropped the reconciliation spreadsheet onto the table. Page after page of proof. Each line annotated, each footnote cross-referenced. And at the bottom, the audit log showing Don's login. Date, time, file accessed. Reynolds leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You're telling me finance suppressed a $250,000 payout?" I didn't blink. "Yes, and here's the proof." Don opened his mouth, closed it, opened again. "This is out of context. These figures aren't final." "They're final," I cut in. "Confirmed by Everline's own quarterly. I spoke with their director last week. They're waiting for us to reconcile. After that, funds release automatically. Unless," I added, "we choose to forfeit." The silence cracked like ice. Cullen cleared his throat. "Look, even if this is technically accurate, Ava overstepped. She went digging into archives without authorization." "Correction," I said. "I went digging into archives you buried." The CEO's gaze snapped to him. "Is that true?" He flinched. "Just enough." Reynolds turned back to me. "Who owns the reconciliation?" I pushed the contract forward. One line circled in red. "Project lead entity, responsible for operational execution." My initials were on the project sign-off sheet. The ink might have been faded, but it was there. "By contract," I said. "That's me." The room held its breath. Then Reynolds smiled, small and sharp. "Congratulations, Ava. You've just secured a $250,000 win for this firm, and for yourself. Per policy, bonuses tied to reconciliation flow directly to the designated lead." Cullen's jaw slackened. Don's face turned ashen. The VPs whispered furiously, but it didn't matter. The decision was made. Reynolds stood, extending her hand. Well done. You saw value where no one else did. That's the kind of initiative we need more of. I shook her hand, steady this time. Behind her, Cullen sat frozen, the laughter he'd once weaponized against me curdling into silence. When the meeting ended, I packed my laptop slowly, savoring every second. Colleagues filed out, casting sideways glances, shock, envy, disbelief. Dawn avoided my eyes. Cullen stormed out without a word. I stayed behind, staring at the empty boardroom, and whispered to myself, "They laughed when I picked it up. Let's see who's laughing now." I didn't go back to my desk that day. I didn't want to see the stares, the whispers, the scrambling damage control. Instead, I walked straight out of the building and into the biting winter air. For the first time since I'd started at Harrow and Wild, I wasn't walking with my head down. I wasn't carrying someone else's slides or drowning in someone else's deadlines. I was carrying my own win, $250,000, with my name on it. The transfer hit my account 3 weeks later. I stared at the number on the screen until my vision blurred. It didn't feel real. $250,000. Enough to rewrite my life. Enough to erase every laugh, every smirk, every drop at Ava. I didn't buy champagne. I didn't post a photo. I didn't tell anyone at work. Instead, I made a list. Pay off my student loans. Gone in a single click. Put a down payment on a place that didn't smell like lemon cleaner and loneliness. Done. Invest in myself for once. Courses, certifications, a rainy day fund. Quiet moves, the kind no one could take away from me. Meanwhile, the office turned sour. Cullen stopped joking. His smirk dried up into something brittle, desperate. Word spread fast. He'd laughed at the project that saved the quarter. He'd mocked the rookie who outmaneuvered finance. His credibility cracked, and once a crack appears, everyone sees it. Don wasn't spared either. Audit found the log trails I'd exposed, and suddenly finance had oversight issues. Meetings got tense. People stopped sitting with them at lunch. Me? People who hadn't spoken my name in months suddenly wanted to grab coffee. Tara, the one who smirked about my grave digging, sent me a LinkedIn invite with a note. Proud of you. I didn't accept. The best part? The CEO pulled me aside one afternoon. Ava, she said, this firm needs more eyes like yours. Everyone else chases noise. You found the signal. Don't lose that instinct. I smiled politely, but inside I thought, you didn't protect me when they laughed. You only noticed when I made you money. So I made my choice. I finished the quarter, closed out my assignments, and handed in my resignation. No drama, no speeches, just a single envelope on HR's desk and a quiet smile as I walked out the revolving doors for the last time. My last sight of Cullen was perfect. He was in the lobby trying to charm a client who looked unimpressed. He saw me, opened his mouth to say something, but I didn't stop. I didn't need to. His laugh had once been the sound that haunted me. Now it was nothing more than static. As I stepped into the street, the city buzzing around me, I realized something. They had tried to bury me under a worthless project. Instead, I'd found treasure. They gave me scraps, and I turned them into freedom. And every time I check my account, every time I open the door to the apartment I bought with my own name on the deed, I remember the moment Cullen laughed. It's the sound of a man who thought he'd broken me. It's the sound of someone who never realized the joke was on him.